Welcome to the Real Estate Masters Podcast, where we interview the top names in the real estate game. If you want to grow your real estate business, see more podcasts, or get free resources, go to www.remcommunity.com. The only podcast that allows you to directly connect with the guests and many of the highest level names in the real estate game.
You are in for a treat with our next guest. Do me a favor, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and don't forget to go to remcommunity.com to connect with some of the highest level real estate professionals in the United States through our community and through our high level masterminds. Let's go.
Welcome everybody to today's show. I'm Tony Javier, your host of Real Estate Masters Podcast. Today we have Brian ONeill. Look forward to talking to him about some great things he's doing with his business. We're going to talk phone. We're going to talk terms. We're going to talk talk about some really good topics that you guys are really going to enjoy. So tune in and listen until the end. So Brian ONeill, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, Tony, good to be here. It's going great. It's a beautiful day in Chicago, 60 degrees today. Having a good time.
Awesome. As we film this, the temperature is changing in many different locations. So I just talked to my team in Wichita and they're like, oh, it's finally getting warm out. So I bet Chicago is beautiful this time of year.
It definitely is. It definitely is. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, cool. So Brian, you've been in the business for a few years now. It sounds like you're doing some really good things. You have your own podcast as well, which I'm going to be on later this week. I'm excited about. So tell people kind of how you started. It seems like, Chris Prefontaine is how we got connected. He's been on our show a couple times. He does a lot of great stuff in the space, but it sounds like that is how you got into real estate. So you want to talk about how you got into real estate and kind of some things you're doing now, and we'll dive into some really good topics here.
Yeah, definitely. So just to go back a little bit, I was in corporate America for 25 years. I was in sales for 25 years. I worked for the same company for 17 years. I was actually an elevator salesman, so nothing to do with real estate at all. And I'd always known, or at least I should say known, I felt that there was something bigger for me, something more for me. I just didn't know what that was. Real estate had always fascinated me. I remember when I was a kid, I would beg my parents to take me to look at model homes. I just loved real estate, right? And I started consuming information. I read books, I listened to podcasts, and it was everything. Like I took on the full suite of real estate services. So I was looking at doing rehabs, flips, long-term buy and hold, apartment syndications. That's ultimately where I started to go. I said, okay, this model makes sense for me. I like this. And I went ahead and I started consuming all this data, podcasts, research. I even looked at properties. I was networking. I never did anything. And it was for two reasons. Number one is I was petrified. I was scared. I didn't know what I was doing. I did not have mentorship. And the second reason was fear related, but I was afraid of investing my own money and letting my family down if it didn't work out. And number two, asking other people to invest their money alongside of me. So that ultimately led me to kind of paralyze and freeze and get stuck in that analysis paralysis phase. It was right about that time where I heard Chris talking on a podcast about how he bought his office building on owner financing. And I said, I got to go. That's exactly what I need to go research. I went right to it. And he ultimately became my mentor. And now I know how to buy properties on terms, none of your own credit, no banks. And now I know how to go back to those same apartment buildings and buy those on seller financing. Now I know how to find them and I know how to finance them.
Awesome. Good stuff. So one thing you mentioned was books and podcasts, and then you talked about fear. Like that's, I think, the biggest thing that separates those from being successful and not being successful. So first of all, starting with the education, right? Some people don't even pick up a book or listen to podcasts. So that's the first part of it. Yep. And then the second part is the action part of it, which we're going to talk about something here that you wanted to talk about, but really taking action and like jumping into it, right? So like, what got you from being petrified and afraid to do deals or to start making calls or to start getting into the business to where now you're full board into it? You're doing some really good things. What kind of got you over that edge to really start taking action?
It was a multiple things. And number one, I was fed up. I was sick and tired. I was sick and tired of not, of saying I was going to do something and not chasing my dreams. Right. There was a lot of personal stuff related to that. And then I had also covered some of the other areas that were bothering. Number one, support. Like, what do I do when I get a deal? I had that covered. I had a coach. I think that it's strange, Tony, how we spend our entire lives in school. If we play sports, we have coaches, we have mentors. We get out of school and all of a sudden we think we got it all figured out, right? We go to work and we don't need that anymore. I made that mistake for 25 years and I'll never make it again. I'll never not have a coach or a mentor of some kind or multiple. That really helped me with the mindset piece, knowing that I had the support. If, once I got a deal or how I get these deals or what do I do next, I still use them as a sounding board today. It's super, super important to have those people in your life that can help you because it's going to get difficult. And then the biggest reason we talked a little bit about this before we hit the record button was I have a really strong why I want to do this. And it's because I was missing my son grow up. And he didn't like when I was gone. He didn't like when I left for these long trips. And he was scared to be alone in the house with his mom. So that was what ultimately pushed me over the edge to not miss him grow up. I only got one shot to watch him grow up, right? And that's what really drove me and got me over the edge and keeps me going today is my family.
Yeah, awesome. So a big why, that's, I think, a big reason why people do things is that why, whether it's family, it's sick and tired of what's happening in their lives. I mean, there's so many different reasons. So if you can get a why to really drive you, can kind of get you that over the edge to create action and do something that you wouldn't normally have done. Right. So let's talk about terms. So when you say terms, there's a lot of different, some people call it creative financing. There's like different ways that people talk about what you're talking about, which you call buying properties on terms. So it's interesting that, and you may have the same philosophy. I actually heard this last week at a mastermind I was a part of. Someone's like, you name the price, I'll name the terms. If you name the terms, I'll name the price, right? Because almost every property, not every property, but most properties you can buy if you either change the terms of the price to make it fit what you're looking for, right? Obviously, there's properties that are over leveraged that you just can't do anything with. So just tell us how you put deals together and work your terms deals.
Yeah, we say terms, we are talking about creative financing or seller finance. There's a bunch of different things you can say, and it's interesting that mastermind that you mentioned what the gentleman said. I say something to the effect of, I'm willing to give you the price that you want if you're willing to give me the term that I need. Which is basically the same thing. It's just worded differently, and I think there's an opportunity in most transactions to do something on terms, just as long as you as the buyer, me, understand what the seller's situation is, understand what their problem is. And that's what we do. I kind of leave the real estate thing aside. I'm looking at what specific problem, or maybe it's a multiple problems that I can help the seller with, and then use a terms transaction, whether it's seller financing if they own their house free and clear, which is 1/3 of all houses in America don't have a mortgage on them. Or if they have some equity or some equity, we can work out a transaction there to protect their equity. This all comes from a personal experience I had like 6 years ago on my personal residence, where I did what most people do. They hire a broker, they put a sign in the yard, they take a bunch of pictures, and they hope and pray that they're going to get the price that they want in a short amount of time. When I sold my house, when we put our house for sale, I thought I was going to get $40,000 in equity. After everybody got paid, after it was all said and done, I got $4,000. And at the time, I said to my wife, I said, I could have done that. Like, I didn't need to hire all these people to get $4,000. I could have done that. And I didn't know what the answer was at the time, but if I had known me 6 years ago, I would have got the 40 grand. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do when we're talking to sellers, is protect their cash position. It's their money. They've worked hard for it. and you ultimately give it away to everybody else. If you're willing to finance, you can get more and way more for your house.
So tell us, so terms and price. So I've heard people explain it different ways. There's usually one like kind of pretty solid way to do it, but then there's also other ways to do it. So let's go into a situation where someone has a house that's paid off, because most of the time, I think the creative way that you do it, from what I understand, the property needs to be free and clear, which I actually heard the numbers higher now at this mastermind. So there's a lot of high level guys at this mastermind and guys that know data and all kinds of stuff. And they said, I think it's reached 40% is what the number is of houses that are paid off in the US. And the reason he said that is because people think that there's a crash potentially coming. Well, how can a crash happen when there's so many houses paid off and they don't need to sell? They're not underwater, right? And even people that have mortgages, they still have a lot of equity. So, it doesn't force them to have to sell. And so, so let's say you have a property free and clear. It's worth $200,000 in its best day. Someone comes in and says, hey, I need $180,000 for this house. Talk us through how you would structure a deal like that, knowing that if you gave them that price or even close to that price, the terms or the deal typically wouldn't work.
Yeah. So if I'm tracking with you correctly, the seller wants 200 or they want 180.
They want 180, in its best day that's a $200,000 house. Yep. And it needs some repairs. It doesn't need 50 or 100,000 worth of repairs, but it needs some updating, maybe, let's call it $20,000 worth of repairs. How would you structure that deal to get them close to that price that they need?
Sure. Okay. So that's a great question. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page with you there. So as we go back to what we had stated about that, if I get the term I want, like price becomes irrelevant. If a seller owns their house free and clear, and we get the length of time that we need, and we can structure something on principal only payments, which a lot of our owner financing deals are that way. We pay principal only. The price is irrelevant. So on a $180,000 house, as long as that house is habitable, livable, and I don't have to, fix major issues like foundation or roof or mechanicals, and I get the term I want, we can structure something at 180,000 or potentially even more if we get the term that we want. So it's all about finding out what the seller's motivation is and what their goals are. So I'll ask a seller, if I could get you to that number, 180,000, and we agree upon a payment that makes sense for you monthly, how long are you willing to go? And I let them answer. They say, well, I don't know. Maybe what's the average? And now I'm in the driver's seat. And I'll say, well, some of our sellers see the benefit of taking payments over a 20 or 30-year period for tax purposes or estate planning purposes. What were you thinking? I still haven't told them anything. Like, they're going to tell me eventually, well, probably I don't want to go that long, maybe 10. All right. Now they just told me 10 years. And honestly, Tony, that's there. I'd pay them the 200,000 if I got 10 years principal only payments. Again, it doesn't make any difference what the price is if you get the term that makes sense for you.
No, that's good. I like that. I love those open-ended questions, because when you ask, because, even when I'm sold something, like not even just houses, but some people will just like sell. And then, they don't let me do any talking. But if you can ask questions and let the other person that you're trying to sell or negotiate with answer the questions, that's where the magic happens. And then you used a well-known tactic, which is basically give them like a scenario that's way, I don't want to say worse than you're willing to accept. So that way, if you said, most sellers go 5 years, 10 years, 15, and maybe 20 years, then in the mind, the seller is going to say, oh, I'm going to choose 5 years. But when you say 20 to 30 years, then that seems like a huge number. So then if they come down to 10, it seems like they were able to get a good deal, right? Instead of going 20 to 30 years, you were willing to work with them and do 10. And even if they did 5, as long as you could make the numbers work and make principal and payments for 5 years, I imagine you could still make that deal work. So for those who are listening and don't quite understand the concept, I'll kind of explain. When you buy a property for 180,000, typically you're putting 10 to 20% down. You're making principal and interest payments. And a good chunk of the interest is going towards a good chunk of the payment, I should say, is going towards the interest. So if you're making a $2,000 payment, it might be $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month, depending on how much you're amortizing, is going to go towards interest. So if you're able to get that going towards principal, then that's a huge amount of money that's going to pay down the property that normally, if you would have gone to a traditional bank and gotten the money, that would go to them instead of the property. And so that's why you're able to pay the higher prices, because of those payments. So how would you tell us a little bit more? Like, what would you do from a standpoint of like proposing payments? Because you could say 1,000 a month, you could say 10,000 a month. How do you come up with the amount of money you're willing to pay someone on that property?
Sure. So great question. And I just go back to exactly what I did with the term. And we call that term anchoring, where I'm starting way out in the future and then, coming up with something that makes sense. And yes, 4 years, 5 years, I'd take that at that deal. When I talk about the monthly payment, because ultimately what I'm looking for from a seller is like, we can't give them everything, right? Because sellers are going to be concerned about the price, the monthly, the down payment in some cases. Sometimes they'll want a down payment and then interest, especially on longer terms. So we can't give them everything. So I normally will ask what's most important to them. And then I get a feel for how I can structure the deal. But the same thing on monthly, I would just say, hey, what's the lowest you would accept on a monthly basis? What's the lowest payment you would accept? They'll answer you. I will have done my research. I will look at, okay, I got to pay the taxes on this house. I got to pay insurance. I got to look at what rental comps are in the area, because I need to make a spread on a monthly basis. And as long as their number is within a range that I want to get, then I'll accept it. Now, one thing I'll just mention about having these conversations, that if you do it the right way and ask the right questions, the seller will write the deal for you. Like, you don't ever have to make an offer. Like, they're telling you, like, okay, I'll go 5 years, I'll take 180 and I'll take $900 a month. They just wrote the deal. And as long as it fits within your parameters, then you send over the offer, or you send over the contract, right? And they sign it. So it's all about how you frame the conversation and insert their motivation.
Yeah, this is such like, I've been in the business this is my 21st year now. And this is still something I'm not doing that I really know that I should be doing, that I've kind of talked to my team about, and they gave me some pushback on. But not a lot of people know about this method, right? And it's a difference. Like, let's say you're doing, 20 deals a year. I'll just throw out a number. What if you could do one more deal a year, 2 more deals a year, 3 more deals a year? I imagine those that are getting a high volume of leads could probably end up doing a lot more deals per year by using this method. Whereas, without this method, they wouldn't be able to do those deals. So I'm encouraging you guys to think about how you can take some of the leads that normally you would have thrown away, where they're asking way too much, and see if you can do those deals. And I'm going to go back to my team after having this conversation with you. And I had with Chris Prefontaine not too long ago as well. And for some reason, I keep sitting on it and not pushing forward with that idea. So I think that's good. So let's move over into another topic before we start wrapping up. You mentioned before we hit record that people have fear of the phone. That's something that I hate. I hate the phone. Like, if I had to cold call, if I had to reach out to people, to me, that's not my personality. I'm an introvert, even though people think I'm an extrovert because of, podcasts and stuff like that, that I do, and the videos that I do. But when it comes down to it, that's not me. I actually heard a story, and this will kind of play into what you're probably going to come in and talk about. Is same mastermind I was at last week. There was a guy, we were sitting down at dinner, and he said, there's a 25-year-old kid, and I say kid, he's still an adult, but 25-year-old that is worth, I think he said he threw out a big number. It was like $40 million. 25 years old. And the way he made his money is when he was like 21, he was cold calling billionaires. He would cold call billionaires. Most of them, the secretaries would say, whatever, I'll take a message, tell it, but he was able to get a hold of one that said, hey, let's meet for pie tomorrow. Right? Just random. Let's meet for pie tomorrow. And so he goes and meets with a guy, and over a few month period, the guy's like, send me ideas. I'll look at them. And so finally he comes up with an idea, and it was basically something he could do with storage units. And the guy says, okay, that's $1 billion idea. Cause the guy was like, how do I become a billionaire? The kid, the 21-year-old at that time. So anyway, over just the last, and I may have my numbers wrong. He may be 27, but it's been like 4, 5, 6 years, maybe 7, that he's been in business. And he started because he cold called the billionaire, was able to get him as a mentor, which you mentioned already, having a mentor. And I'm assuming he didn't get this far into, but I imagine that billionaire is probably backing some of the stuff he's doing, right? So tell us how cold calling has helped you, and how it could help other people if they could be good on the phone and get up the nerve to do that.
Yeah. And it's something that I deal with it all the time with people who are just petrified of the phone, and it's okay. It really is. It's not for everyone. I was on the phone for 25 years. I was talking to people that were 10 times my net worth and having success selling them various products. Like I said, I was in the elevator business. So I talked to a lot of business owners, but I can tell you the first time I talked to a seller, I was scared out of my mind. And it was simply because I did not know what to say. I had to learn an entire new business, and I was projecting onto the conversation. I was already playing it out in my head. Like, this seller is going to hang up on me. They don't need me. And you just have to get over that. So I always go back to my why, right? I remember I would sit there and I would look at the phone. I said, all right, I'm doing this for my son. Like, I don't want to miss my kid growing up anymore. So I always used that. And then I got to the point where I was well rehearsed. So it was just reps for me. Like, I had to get good on the phone. So I listened, I read my scripts. I listened to my recorded calls. I listened to other people's recorded calls over and over again, to the point where, okay, I have now eliminated not knowing, like I'm rehearsed, right? Just like guys who play in the NFL, like there's a reason they're good on the field. They're practiced, they're well rehearsed. And then I developed a mindset where, okay, I'm talking to somebody who's trying to sell their house, right? So I'm calling people who are actively trying to sell. Like, what would I do if my neighbor put a for sale sign in the yard? What would I do? I would go over and talk to them. What's the situation? Why are you selling? Where are you going? That's it. That's when I talk to sellers. Those are the questions I'm asking them. Like, why'd you take it off the market? Where are you going? When do you need to be there? What's your situation? You're trying to find out what their situation is, what their motivation is, to see if you can help, versus, I want to buy your house for $50,000, and they click and they hang up on you, right? So you're really trying to have a conversation. This only takes like 2 or 3 minutes to establish this. And just by rehearsing and having that mentality, like, go find somebody I can help today. That's what I always do when I make phone calls. It's like, all right, there's somebody out there that needs my help. They're behind in their payments. They're behind in their taxes. They owe what the house is worth. They don't want to use a realtor. Like those people exist regardless of how hot the market is or isn't. They exist every single day. You just got to go find them.
So from a standpoint of calling, is that how you find your deals? Do you do a lot of cold calling?
I do. I did in the beginnings. When I first started, I was doing all the calling for a couple of reasons. Number one, I needed to get good at it so I could teach it to other people. Mm-hmm. And now I'm doing second level calls. Like, I structure the deals mainly. So I have a team, I have VAs that are calling and screening folks and seeing if they're interested, but I've trained them on how to do that. And then I'll take the second level calls, the people who are shown motivation and an openness to do something on terms. That's who I talk to.
How about outside of real estate? Have you used the cold calling, or just in general, the conversations and contacting people directly to really affect your business? Or is it mainly through real estate investing?
Yeah. I mean, I still call people today, right? You have to be good on the phone. Now I do a lot of networking, right? So it's difficult to find in this market. It's a little bit more challenging to find deals. It's not like it was a couple of years ago. So I'm calling realtors. I call like 2 or 3 brokers a day just to say, hey, I'm buying. I'm in this area. Do you work with investors? What areas do you serve? So I'm just always trying to connect with people, and those are cold calls, and not everyone's open to that, but you have to have the mentality that someone's gonna. So I talked to a realtor this morning before we got on, and she had a 12-unit portfolio that she was looking to help a seller with, and they don't want to take a lump sum. So it's like, if I didn't make that call, I would never be presented with that opportunity.
Yeah. I've been taking notes this whole time. And this thing that I took a note on, I think was probably the biggest nugget that I've gotten here. And I'd say it's a little bit random. So you mentioned VAs, you mentioned cold calling, and then you mentioned reaching out to agents. So I've been thinking in my mind the last few months, I've got a ton of businesses and I've got so many different things that we can do in our business. I need to hire more people, and I need people to focus and concentrate on things that are very high level dollar productive activities to continue to grow our business and the trajectory we want it to go. And so, I've got about 4 or 5 hires that I need to make here soon. And I'm going to add to the list a VA to cold call real estate agents and brokers, because they have deals that are coming through the pipeline. Like you just said, they have if a residential agent gets a multifamily property, they probably don't know what to do with it, right? So if you can hit them at the right time, I had a seller call me about a 6-unit or 12-unit or 20-unit. I have no idea how to price those properties. Why don't I connect you? Just pay me a referral fee. And then even commercial brokers. I mean, every industry's hot right now. So they may want to put them on the market for their client, but who knows? They may have an off-market property that they could send you. So I appreciate you sharing that. And just to round off the conversation, and I'll let you finish your thoughts here. But that's why some of the highest paid professionals are salespeople. It's because they're when you get the skill, I don't even know if I'd call it a skill. We'll call it a skill for the lack of better terms right now. But if you can master the skill of calling and talking to people, you can make a lot of money that way, right? So
100%. I mean, 100%. And it really all just comes down to you as the caller, just really getting over yourself. Because what I learned was that the sellers that I was calling initially were more fearful than I was, because they had no idea what I was talking about. So if I'm sitting here saying, I don't know what I'm doing, well, at least I have a premise of what seller financing is. I have an understanding. They were even more scared, and they're guarded, right? So you could call it a skill, but it's just having a conversation with somebody and treat it as such. And you'd be surprised what people will tell you if you talk to them the right way and make it about them. I talk 20% of the time when I'm on the phone. I'm mostly just listening. And if you could master that skill right there, listening versus, telling everyone how great you are, you're going to get people to reveal their situation. And then again, when we went over the owner financing opportunity, they can write the deal for you. I've had that happen.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff, Brian. We're going to start wrapping it up. Mm-hmm. Last thoughts, last tidbit of information that you want to share over the last few years that you've really started scaling your business. What are some tips? What are some things that you would tell our audience if they really wanted to make a big difference in their lives today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I would say that belief in yourself is really something that blocked me for a long time. I didn't think I was worthy. And, sometimes I still struggle with that, right? So you always have to have this belief in yourself that you are worthy. One of my favorite quotes, I read it, I turn it into an affirmation. I read it every day, is I am just as worthy, deserving, and capable of achieving my ideal outcome as any other person on this earth. I will prove that today with my actions. That's how I live my life. And the difference between the folks who are super successful versus those who are not is because they take those action steps every day. And you don't have to chop the whole tree down in one day. Just create small wins, stack a bunch of small wins together. And then all of a sudden that stacks really high. And then you get that momentum, that forward momentum, and it'll just crush your goals. So that's what I would say to the listeners is don't create these small wins on a daily basis, whether it's make one phone call tomorrow and then make 5 the next day or whatever, just keep stacking.
Yeah, good stuff. Love it, Brian. Well, thanks for joining us today. How can people get a hold of you if you want them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. So I have an Instagram page. It's the real Brian ONeill. You can email me as well. If you go to Brian at bkwpropertysolutions.com, I actually have an ebook that I wrote that's just about to be launched. So if you email me, it's How to Master the Phone in 90 Days. I'll give it to all your listeners for free. You just have to either hit me on Instagram with a DM or email me. I'm happy to give it away because I really think it's super important for everyone to have.
Awesome. Good stuff, Brian. Well, keep doing what you're doing, Brian. Appreciate you. And I look forward to connecting again soon.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate the opportunity. Good seeing you.
You too.
Thanks for listening. Now go to www.remcommunity.com to connect with today's guest, see our high-level masterminds, and to get free resources. Don't forget to share this with a friend and leave us a 5-star review. We'll see you on the next episode.